Fog wrapped itself around the forest like a living entity, thick and unrelenting, curling around gnarled tree trunks and creeping over twisted roots that clawed at the blackened earth. The further Mara drove along the winding, crumbling road, the heavier the air seemed to become, almost tangible in its weight. Every mile carried her deeper into a place she instinctively knew she shouldn't be. Yet something, an unnameable compulsion, drew her forward. She could feel the forest watching, 1,000 invisible eyes tracking the small movements of her car through the mist. The silence was absolute, except for the occasional snap of a branch under an unseen weight, and the soft hiss of fog swirling against the windshield. The road ended abruptly at the rusted gates of the mansion, a hulking structure that seemed to have sprouted from the very soil. Ancient and grotesque, its silhouette loomed against the fog, jagged like broken teeth, windows hollow and dark, like the eyes of a corpse staring into the void. The iron gates creaked faintly as she pushed them open, as if protesting her intrusion. The wind carried a faint, almost imperceptible whisper that slithered through the trees. She couldn't make out the words, but the cadence, rising and falling like the sigh of a dying thing, sent a chill racing down her spine. Mara stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on gravel that seemed sharper than usual, slicing through the cold night. The air was icy, though there was no wind to explain the sudden chill, and it clung to her skin in sharp, prickling waves. She drew in a shallow breath, feeling her chest tighten. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to drive away and never think of this place again. But the letter, anonymous, mysterious, promising answers to questions she didn't even know she had, pulled her forward with a force she could not resist. Curiosity, that dangerous, insistent curiosity, drove her toward the mansion, like a moth circling a flame. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying slowly on its rusted hinges, letting out a soft groan every time it moved. Mara hesitated, hand hovering over the worn, splintered handle. The inside smelled, before she even stepped through the threshold. A mix of decay, old wood, and something metallic, coppery, and sharp, like dried blood. The air was thick, oppressive, pressing down on her chest, as though the house itself were aware of her presence, measuring her, judging her. She swallowed hard and pushed the door, stepping into darkness. The mansion's interior was a world apart from the outside, though worse, somehow more sinister. Dust hung in the air like fog, caught in faint streams of moonlight filtering through broken, grimy windows. The floorboards creaked and moaned beneath her feet, sending echoes down endless hallways, each groan stretching unnaturally long, like the house was speaking in a language of pain. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, curling along walls and ceilings in ways that defied logic. She turned quickly, only to see empty corners, empty hallways, and yet the sensation of being watched, of something shifting just beyond perception, remained. A sudden knock echoed from deep inside the mansion, or perhaps it was a door slamming somewhere far away. Mara's heart skipped a beat. She told herself it was the wind. It had to be, but the air was still, so still that her own heartbeat sounded deafening, and yet she knew she was not alone. The shadows seemed to thicken as she moved, pooling in the corners, curling toward her as if hungry. She reached the parlor, where the faint light from outside spilled across a grand piano that had long stopped being played. The keys pressed themselves down, one by one, producing sour, haunting notes that echoed through the empty room. Each note resonated like a whisper in her skull, vibrating deep within her chest. The chandelier above swayed slightly, though there was no wind, and cobwebs clung to every surface, glimmering faintly in the moonlight. Mara froze, a cold hand brushing against her shoulder. She whipped around, expecting to see someone, anyone, but the room remained empty, silent except for the music that seemed to now play just for her. The whispers began, faint at first, almost as if carried by the wind. They grew in intensity, overlapping, merging into a low chorus of unintelligible words. Some were pleading, soft and broken, like a child lost in the dark. Others were angry, sharp, snapping like the crack of a whip against her eardrums. Mara's breath came fast, shallow, each inhale seeming to catch on some invisible barrier, pressing against her lungs. Driven by some reckless mixture of fear and fascination, she climbed the staircase at the end of the hall. The railing splintered under her grip, forcing her to tread carefully, each step threatening to betray her presence to whatever lingered in this house. The walls along the stairwell were lined with portraits, their colors long faded, their faces staring at her with eyes too lifelike, too accusing. Some seemed to twitch when she glanced at them from the corner of her eye, tilting their heads ever so slightly, a motion just beyond the realm of possibility. The hallway above was tighter, darker, suffocating. Doors lined either side, some closed, some ajar, each leading to rooms that seemed to whisper secrets of decades long past. The farthest door emitted a faint glow, flickering like a dying flame, and shadows pooled beneath it, writhing and stretching unnaturally. Mara's heart pounded as though trying to escape her chest, her instincts screaming to stop, to retreat, to flee. And yet, she couldn't turn away. Her curiosity, her need to know, propelled her forward despite the dread knotting her stomach. She reached for the doorknob, cold metal under her trembling fingers. The shadows seemed to pulse and twist, wriggling like living things, reacting to her presence. She pushed the door slowly, the hinges screaming in protest. The room beyond was barely lit by the flickering light, shadows crawling across the walls, like black ink spreading over pale paper. The air inside smelled even stronger of decay, heavy with something she could not identify, a combination of rot, iron, and a faint, acrid tang that made her eyes water. The door groaned closed behind her as she stepped inside, leaving the hallway in near total darkness. Mara realized with a jolt that she could no longer hear the soft creak of her footsteps as clearly. It was as though the house had absorbed the sounds, holding them hostage, stretching them into eternity. Her pulse quickened. She knew, with a growing instinctual certainty, that whatever lived here was aware of her, watching her every movement. She swallowed, tasting copper on her tongue, and forced herself to take another step, drawn deeper into the mansion's silent, suffocating embrace. And somewhere, in the thick pulsing shadows, something shifted, a sound so subtle, yet undeniably deliberate, as if the house itself exhaled, acknowledging her presence, and perhaps already beginning its game. The room was colder than anything Mara had ever felt, a bone-chilling frost that seeped into her very marrow. Her breath fogged in the air, curling and twisting, as if some unseen force was watching, studying, delighting in her fear. Before her, a cracked mirror reflected her form, but the image was wrong. Her reflection lingered for a fraction of a second after she moved, then smiled with a slow, sinister grin that she did not return. She stumbled backward, a low rasping sound emanating from the corners of the room, like the groan of some ancient being, pressing against the walls from within. Shadows thickened along the edges, moving with impossible fluidity. They coalesced into figures, humanoid in shape, but grotesque in every detail, limbs bent at unnatural angles, heads twisted unnervingly, eyes hollow voids that seemed to pierce her soul. They didn't make a sound, but their presence was a roar in her mind, a crushing weight pressing against her sanity. Mara's hands shook violently as she pressed them to her ears, trying in vain to shut out the whispering chorus that now filled the air. Words overlapped, pleading, screaming, threatening, twisting in tones she could not understand, yet felt in her bones. A cold voice slithered through the room, brushing past her ear like a live thing. "You should not have come," it hissed, each syllable scraping against her nervous system. She spun, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing. The shadows seemed to pulse, reaching toward her with jagged, smoke-like fingers that barely touched the air, yet left a sting on her skin, as if she had been burnt. Mara's pulse hammered so hard, she feared it might rupture through her chest. She stumbled toward the door, but it had vanished, leaving only a solid wall, where exit had been moments before. The mirror trembled violently, and in its fractured surface, scenes began to appear. They weren't reflections, they were visions, flashbacks of the mansion's history, captured like living photographs. A family celebrated within these walls, decades ago, their laughter suddenly snapping into screams. Candles flickered as shadowy figures moved across the room, unseen, yet undeniably present. Rituals, old and cruel, performed by hands long dead, replayed in haunting clarity. A mother wept while a shadow loomed over her child. A father tried to run as the walls seemed to close in, swallowing him. The mansion had been feeding on them, on their fear, on their despair, and now it wanted her. Shapes lunged from the darkness, and Mara felt herself lifted off the ground, suspended by some invisible, malevolent force. Her body twisted unnaturally, though she struggled with every fiber of strength left in her trembling limbs. Coldness seeped into her bones, searing her very nerves, as the whispers crescendoed into a scream so loud it seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Vibrating through her skull, the room became a blur of shadow and sound, and time seemed to stretch and bend around her. The mansion was alive. It was conscious, patient, hungry. Through the chaos, a single thought anchored her: escape. Instinct overrode terror, and she summoned a final, desperate burst of strength. Her hand shot toward a nearby window, its glass cracked but not yet broken. With a scream that merged her fear and fury, she hurled herself at it. The glass shattered under her weight, slivers cutting into her arms and face, but the pain was irrelevant. She tumbled out into the freezing night air, branches tearing at her clothes and hair, as if the forest itself conspired to keep her trapped. She hit the ground hard and scrambled to her feet, every sense screaming danger. Behind her, the mansion loomed, darker than the night around it, yet undeniably alive. Faint flickers of movement danced in the windows, shadowed forms that paused to watch her, patient and deliberate. The whispers followed her even outside, low and insistent, pressing against her mind, filling every quiet corner with their dreadful insistence. Her lungs burned as she ran, each step echoing unnaturally, as though the night itself extended her fear. Mara didn't dare look back, yet her eyes betrayed her. She glimpsed a figure at the topmost window, leaning forward, its form blurred but unmistakably watching, its head tilted inhumanly, the hollow eyes locking onto her, and she felt the weight of countless eyes pressing down from the mansion's darkened walls. Her feet moved of their own accord, driven by pure survival, and finally she stumbled onto the road, where her car waited. The engine roared to life, and she hit the accelerator without looking back. The mansion receded into the fog, but she could still sense it, a lurking presence just beyond the reach of her headlights. The whispers didn't fade. They followed soft now, subtle, but ever-present, a constant reminder that the house's hunger was not sated. Even as she reached the first town miles away, lights blazing and people moving obliviously around her, Mara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed alive, every reflection a potential trap. The mansion had marked her. She realized, with a shiver that clawed at her chest, that it would wait, endlessly patient, for the next soul drawn by curiosity, the next victim brave, or foolish enough to enter its dark embrace. She parked her car outside a 24-hour diner, hands shaking as she tried to calm herself. The neon lights flickered overhead, mundane and banal, compared to the horrors she had just escaped. But even here, inside the bright, warm interior, she felt it. The pressure in the air, a whisper brushing against her ear, almost too faint to catch. She shook her head, trying to convince herself it was imagination. But a single thought lingered, unshakable and cold. It waits. Always. Hungry. Patient. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by fractured images of the mansion. Every shadow in her room seemed to stretch unnaturally. Every gust of wind a whisper calling her name. For weeks after, Mara avoided the forest, avoided any road that led to Hollow Creek. Yet sometimes, in the dead of night, she could hear the faintest sound of piano keys pressing down on their own. Faint music carried on the wind, and somewhere deep in the fog-laden forest, the mansion stood, patient, unchanging, waiting for the next curious soul to step into its endless shadows. Even now, she sometimes wonders if she truly escaped, or if part of her remains trapped there, a whisper among the shadows, feeding the mansion's insatiable hunger. The thought is enough to make her shiver, and she knows in her bones that she will never be free from its presence.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.